Namaskar and welcome to episode number 13 of Pustakalya podcast, where we are going to discuss the second characteristics out of the three, which this paper is studying in the psychedelic state as compared to the normal waking state, which is the cognitive functions. Cognitive functions like what can you hold things in memory same as you can you use your or declarative memory in a similar fashion, your do you have mental control and things like creativity, all these abilities that the mind has. What happens to those? Does it increase? Does it decrease? What is the data? What are the data that supports it or refutes it? So, first is memory, attention, and communication. Memory, attention, and communication. Memory. Well, first of all, people do talk about this state when they're in this state, that they have lack of control, they have difficulty making even the smallest decisions, and they can't understand what is important and what isn't, and all those first person reports are present for a lot of psychedelic states in people. So but not everything is impaired. Declarative memory isn't impaired, surprisingly. You apparently they questions like how old are you, who is the president, what are you, who are you, all these things, they are not really impaired. Mental control is impaired. You have lack of control. You cannot do things as good. That requires a lengthier attention span, I would say, I would presume. Things like counting backwards and serial addition, adding a lot of things at once, and maybe also reproducing small brief passages. That seems to be harder than in normal states of consciousness. But working memory isn't impaired. You can still hold the same number of items in your working memory as in a normal state of consciousness, as on psychedelics. So memory, some part of memory is, some part of memory isn't. Mostly memory isn't impaired. Attention is impaired, but communication, little is known. There is not much research, but of course people say it's hard to communicate on LSD. The subject was unable to read when requested to do so, but was unable to generate. Was able to read when requested to do so, but was unable to generate spontaneous utterances or answer questions, except by gestures. Someone forgot. Someone stopped speaking for 3 hours, and all those interesting experiences that they have, and it's hard to communicate in those new experiences. I would presume one thing about psychedelic states is that being on psychedelic state is such a whack on the head for some people, in the sense that it's such an earth shattering experience that no wonder your attention is caught up in this. You have never seen this kind of things, these kind of perception that you're noticing right now is so strange, perceptually so strange, that no wonder. I mean, some part of this research is making me question how can you this is not even the worst part. I'm going to come into the second part of this second characteristic, the cognitive functions, is creativity, insight, and abstract thinking. Here, I think they kind of jumped the gun. Hear me out. Okay, so this is what they say. So, first of all, there is a very interesting test. You would question how someone might even test something like creativity. But so creativity, there is a possible substitute for that, I would say. connections between different ideas is one of these ways in which you can think of creativity. That okay, different new ideas are coming up, novel ideas. There is so much noise in the background, sorry for that. No, novel ideas are coming up, and that's one aspect of creativity. And according to this paper, there is the second aspect of creativity is to rate those ideas. What is the new, the ability to rate those ideas. Which one is a good idea, which one is a bad idea, which one is not so novel, which one is novel. So those are the two aspects of creativity that they are considering. How do they test the first one, the novelty of ideas, if they have new connections, right? So how do they test for connections? There is a test called semantic associations using word priming. What does it mean? They sit you down in a chair, right? And there is a bunch of words are coming in front of you, which some are not English words, some are English words, and you have to press a button as soon as you realize whether they are or not. You have two buttons in front of you. You press one of them if it is a legal legitimate word in English, and the second one if it's just gibberish. And whenever you can understand that, you press the button, right? This is called lexical decision task. And the more quickly you can identify the difference between these two, the more you can test a lot of different things with this. They are testing the speed. They are noticing the speed with which you do it. So you're told to do it as quickly as possible, which is the purpose of this test, right? So you sit and you do it. But what they do is they use this task to with different other ideas. So one of them is priming your mind with some pre information. I think we discussed it yesterday or day before yesterday, where I think yesterday, there is a lack of they prime you before they startle you to check the startled response, and the inhibition is reduced or something like that. So this is kind of like the same priming, but it's a different type of priming. Like semantic priming is like, if I say nurse, now identifying doctor, the word doctor would be faster if you have just seen the word nurse in this lexical, in this, when you're sitting on this seat and the word doctor comes in front of you. Had you heard the word nurse before it, you would have been quicker in clicking that. So that's priming. There's a noticeable effect of priming, right? And this priming effect is increased. So this is this test, right? This is a test. You can test a lot of different ways. This one is called semantic priming. There is perceptual priming, like car and carpet. I think that's one of them, or something like that. Maybe I'm wrong, but it's perceptually similar, like band, stand. I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm definitely not sure. I'm just guessing here, but something like that. Comparing. So this is what happens when they tested it on psychedelic drugs, people on psychedelics in psychedelic state. Comparing direct and indirect word pairs. Direct word pairs would be black, white, and indirect word pairs would be lemon, sweet. Things like lemon, sweet. Psilocybin was found to significantly increase indirect but not direct semantic priming. So direct semantic priming was unchanged, but indirect, things that are a little far off. So this was interpreted as evidence that psilocybin increases the availability of remote associations, which in turn make a wider array of thoughts available to the agent. But these guys, but Spitzer is the paper on the writer of the paper. He also says there is um, another way it can be interpreted. It should also be noted that the authors of this study suggest that the indirect priming effect might be associated with cognitive impairments insofar as it reflects a decreased capacity to use contextual information for semantic processing. So what they're saying is the fact that you can associate words that are a little far off means that conceptually you are going a little wayward. Your cognitive impairments in your capacity is decreased to stay in context. You are getting out of context. It's easy to wander off. The mind is wandering off, and then it grabs onto something which is outer easily because it's wandering off, kind of like that, I think. And so it goes on to say that these findings suggest that psychedelics enhance the capacity to formulate novel thoughts. But it's okay. So this is where they say that there is a second aspect where the ability to distinguish between novel ideas and just ideas that just seem novel. They're not really novel. It is heavily impaired because of self-reports. They say that self-reports say that. Self-reports like everything around me was happening so fast that I no longer could follow what was going on. I had difficulty in distinguishing important from unimportant things, and conflicts and contradictions seemed to dissolve. Thing received higher ratings. These are semi subjective. They are subjective, but they are a multiple choice question. So you tick mark them if you agree with them. I don't know the liability of such a test, whether they are priming the person to think in those terms. I don't know, but that's the difficulty of testing all these things. Further evidence in favor of the idea that psychedelics impair the evaluative dimensions of thought is provided by Deschamps et al. I don't know how to say it. Et al. 1952, who described LSD giving rise to a flight of ideas with rhythm, with rhyming and punning, preoccupation, irrelevant and pedantic imitation. He said it feels like imitation and as leading to an over-generalized and tangential style of thought. Okay. So LSD impaired the ability of subjects to understand proverbs, which is interesting. A finding that subsequently replicated by Silverstein and Klee in 1958. Findings that psychedelics impair the evaluative dimension of abstract thought are in line with the parallels that previous researchers have drawn between certain aspects of the psychedelic state and the psychotic state. So they say that it's similar to psychotic. We don't know what is right and what is wrong. Now, this is where I have some... In the summary, they say psychedelics seem to impair many of the central elements of cognition: decision-making, memory, attention, and abstract thought. Although psychedelics appear to enhance the capacity to generate novel ideas, they also seem to impair the capacity to evaluate these ideas and distinguish those that represent genuine cognitive advances from those that do not. Based on the evidence available, it seems plausible that the increase in salience or amount sensory information experience may itself be suboptimal for higher level functions, right? Finally, the deep commonalities between unconstrained style of thought seen in psychedelics on the one hand and that seen in psychosis, delusion, and dream states on the other, it is itself an indication that psychedelics do not lead to a cognitively optimal state. This is fine. I agree with most of this, but this is where I have a problem. I agree with that you can say that. However, I don't know, because maybe I should read the actual paper and whatnot. But when they say that it's hard to differentiate between people report that it's hard to differentiate between novel ideas and old and non-novel ideas, and it feels like everything is novel, everything is just. And that really feels like a psychedelic state, that everything is weird and but that maybe you can derive a conclusion on second thoughts that it shows that this state is cognitively worse. At least cognitively, your abilities are reduced, right? But when you are in that state and you're having those new perceptions that you've never had in your life, and something new is coming up, you have difficulty paying attention to anything because there is so much more perception. And this is more perception is already, that's the first characteristic that we already discussed. There is just more patterns that you see in such a scenario. Mind is when it is in the first time may be different from subsequent times. Or maybe he's right. Maybe I have no claim, but it feels like insufficient data for meaningful answer, kind of a, like you are in that state. Something new is being formed. Like people say that their life is changing. So if that kind of an experience is happening, of course you would not like that kind of state to carry on for the rest of your life. It's not cognitively optimal because you cannot understand what is right and wrong. But is it even necessary to see it in that way? Like, and like, I don't know. Just trying to understand if I get anything out of this. But this is interesting. Right? I learned a new test: lexical decision task and semantic associations using word priming, and I like learning new things in new ways in which you get a glimpse of things under the hood. You get to see how they are knowing what they're knowing, and get to understand that, okay, some type of way. This is a very interesting, ingenious task: lexical decision making. Of course, there are pitfalls. But you can generalize that statistically. You can, if with a big enough data set, you can control for everything. Control for different times, different time after which, like half an hour into the test, someone might be much more primed to some type of words. And there are ways, if a big enough data set, there are ways to statistically control for that. And it's nice to see these glimpses into the workings of a scientific field. You don't usually get that in science shows and on television, and even on YouTube, even on these channels. Only some of the channels show and show the way they test it, but it's not ever like acknowledged of how strange and interesting and fascinating that just experimental field is in anything. So in psychology, it's even more interesting because your human subjects are sitting there and racking their brains in their conscious perceptions and putting it to test in different ways. And these small things are extracted. These small data points are extracted from just haysack, like needle in a haysack. And I love it. I just love it. And see, yum, 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 yum. See you tomorrow.